Okay, so now Anish decides to bring his queen to f6 so that he can start pushing the b pawn, and white can easily tackle this by either pushing a4 or just e3, which actually played in this game. And now there are multiple ways for black to continue this game. Black can either capture this knight on f4 to create a double pawn structure, or maybe he can go for b5, trying to deflect this pawn with the same idea of bishop takes f4 and then knight takes d5. But instead here black goes for d6. And after that here white goes for bishop to f3. Maybe he wants to reroute this knight from e2 and then to e4, which attacks this queen. But guys, here black can go for the move a5, opening this a6 square for this knight. And let's suppose if white goes for knight to e2, now comes knight to a6. And if knight at e goes to f4 attacking this queen, simply bishop takes f4, and after knight takes f4, simply queen to f6. And let's suppose if white attacks this queen again, simply queen to h6. And you can see in the next move black is going to bring this knight to b4, which will be a very good outpost for this knight. And after that here black can consider castling queenside, which will give a significant big advantage to black in future. Okay, so in the actual game, after the move bishop to f3, and after that, here Anish slides his king to d8. Maybe he wants to bring this knight to e8 with the idea of knight to f6, or maybe knight to g7. And now it's better for black to bring this knight to g7 so that he can exchange this knight and activate this queen. But instead he goes for queen to h8, which is a mistake because as you can see, this queen on h8 isn't doing anything great since all these squares are already protected, and in the next move white is going to capture this pawn on f5, and by this you can see white will completely take over on this e file. But instead of playing this move, here white decides to play queen to e2, basically with the same threat of e takes f4, e takes f5, so that this queen can target this pawn on e7. And now here white decides to capture this bishop on d7 by knight takes d7. And obviously, here black can't capture this knight on f5 due to the threat of knight to f6, taking benefit of this pin. So that's why here Anish decides to capture this by his king. But guys, now you might be shocked that after the move g4, in this position, black can actually sacrifice his rook by rook takes h5. This is because after takes, now comes bishop to h6, threatening to give a check from this square. And let's suppose if white tries to stop this by king to g3, now comes rook to g8 check, king to f2, rook to e8, and you can see black successfully defends himself, and this bishop on h6 is doing great on this important diagonal, eyeing on this important diagonal. Meanwhile, the knight on d6 is also doing a great job defending this f5 pawn, and this rook and this king are guarding the pawn on e7. uh, and yeah, white is still winning due to material advantage, but it's not easy for him to break through this position. Okay, so in the actual game, after the move e6, here black goes for and now it's better for black to capture this pawn on g4. This is because after takes, now comes f5, and obviously white can't push this pawn further due to this undefended knight. So let's suppose if he captured on f5, now black can consider capturing this pawn on d5. This is because after rook takes e8, knight takes e8, king to g4, d takes c4, b takes c4, rook to d6, and you can see black successfully holds this position and there is nothing that white can do. Okay, so in the actual game, after the move rook to e2, yeah, after this move here black goes for rook to f8. Okay, so here it's better for white to bring this rook to d2 so that he can capture on e6 in the next move, creating immense pressure on this knight and this king. But instead he goes for bishop to d3, blocking this important d file. Okay, so now it's important for black to just slide this king, getting out from an attack in the future, but instead he decides to capture on g4 with a check. And now it's better for white to bring this king further on f5 so that he can create a passer in the h file. But he loses this opportunity because he goes for bishop to f5, and now black just have to find the move king to e5 so that he can attack this bishop as well as move through e5, d4 and c3 square, attacking this pawn chain. But Anish also missed that and he goes for. And now comes the most interesting part of this game. Basically, in this position, Anish sacrificed his f-pawn by giving a check. This is because after knight takes f5, now in this position, I just want you all to pause the video and try to find the only winning move or only move which can save this game. Okay, so one thing is clear that here black cannot go for king to e4. Yes, he wants to go through this c3 square, but this is now losing because now white can start pushing his h pawn further. If bishop to h6, h6, king to d3, h7, king to c3, knight to e7, and obviously you cannot capture due to this promotion. So let's suppose if black goes for bishop to d4, knight to d5 check, king takes b3, knight takes b3, king to b4, king to f3, bishop to h8, king to e4, bishop to d4, king to d5, bishop to h8, knight to d7, simply king takes a4, knight takes c5 check, king to b4, knight to d3 check, king to c3, c5. And you can see this bishop can't stop two passed pawn at a time, and by this you can see this position is completely winning for white. Okay, so in the actual game, after the move knight takes f5, guys, in this position the only move which can save this game is bishop takes h4, and fortunately Anish finds that move. Why this move is now draw? This is because after takes, king to d4, king to f3, king to c3, king to e3, king takes b3, king to d3, king takes a4, king to c3, b5, c takes b5, king takes b5, knight to f5, a4, knight to d6 check, king to a5, knight to c4 check, king to b5, knight to a3 check, king to b6, king to c4, king to c6, knight to b5, and you can see here no side can progress and this position is completely equal. What an amazing defense by Anish Giri. This is your host Bison signing off. Bye bye.